He's right there.
It's AI. Yeah.
Doug.
Yeah.
Doug
Thank you.
from BMO. And then Fabricio, we had you from Go Easy just a few minutes ago, and you're back with us.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk today about developing best practices and metrics for a more effective HR function. And one of the things that I also appreciated, I've got a couple of questions offline throughout the thing, so we're also going to intertwine when we're talking about KPIs and different things, not just what they are and some best practices, but also how to create visualization and really create some of that additional storytelling from that. So I do appreciate some of the additional comments there. Welcome, and Doug. I'm going to start with you. Why don't you all give a little bit about background and then how you got into this space really quickly, so that then we're just all talking as friends, and then we'll kind of dial into the specific topics there.
Sure, yeah. My mic on? Fabrizio, back to back, that's impressive sessions, yeah. So very, very quickly, I started in management consulting at a school. It certainly was not called people analytics. It was probably called workforce analytics or reporting at the time. Did 3 years there, then moved to the energy patch, worked for Suncor Energy for about a decade, 12 years actually, doing workforce planning and strategies, and just learned a ton that hopefully I'll share a little bit today. In the last 3 years, been at BMO, 2 years kind of on the recruitment strategy side, and then the last year I've just moved into a learning function, which is a bit new to me within our technology group, which has been really interesting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll share more about that
Sure.
as we get into it.
Yeah, I shared a little bit. I think I don't need to share again, but yeah, my trajectory was mostly compensation consulting, and then moved to in-house as a total rewards compensation, and more recently with HR systems and analytics.
So let's dive in. Metrics, KPIs, these are terms we've all heard of, we use in different acronyms. I'd like for you all to talk about really, let's get granular a little bit. Mm-hmm. And what are some of the KPIs that you've seen work, be effective? What do people need to be thinking about in terms of creating that synergy between the data that you have to create KPIs from and measure and manage versus those things that are aspirational? But I'll give you all lots of space, but we really want to get into some specific kind of actionable takeaways around how to build those best practices for metrics and KPIs for HR success.
Mm-hmm. I'm a bit of a purist. I'm guilty of that. So anytime I hear about metrics, I go back to core definitions. And just even to prep for this session, I have to remind myself, what is a metric, what is a KPI, mm-hmm. and what is a measure, what's a benchmark, what's a target. So I think being really clear about, are you establishing metrics? I've found often it's KPIs that people are after. You know, we have thousands of metrics, truly. I know the Lytics booth over there has a book about that thick with 600 metrics in it. So I always start with the fundamentals around definitions. What are we talking about? You know, do we really want to target KPIs? Which to me, I'll just say, a KPI includes a metric by kind of natural part of it, and it includes a target, whether a min or a max. Like, it grounds the metric in something to aim for, which of course resonates with any business leader you're in front of. Putting metrics in front of people for the sake of metrics, occasionally it can work. I would say is suboptimal most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to want you to extend that for a minute. Give me some of the specific examples of metrics you see most common that managers and leaders are using in their business, right, to help with the HR function of growing the productivity of their teams. And then I'll turn to you.
Yeah, I think we've talked about like the core ones that everybody knows about, turnover. I dig a little bit deeper, involuntary, voluntary turnover, even into like desirable or undesirable turnover. Like you can drill down into some dimensions that bring different insight. I would say one of my favorite set of metrics, and I've just met Jeff Higgins for the first time here actually, but I've been a disciple of the HCMI stuff my whole career, is all this total cost of workforce, return on human capital. in all the leadership team meetings I've been in with senior leaders, they start to perk up. When you start to talk about productivity, total cost of workforce, the financial measures around workforce, and it also kind of gets you out of that headcount reporting. We've all probably been there. You show headcount on a chart, and then the next conversation's, well, what about contractors? They're a big part of our workforce as well. It kind of removes you from a lot of that kind of bun fighting, if you will, if you can kind of ground it in TCOW. So that's one that I really kind of come back to, if the context is right.
Yeah, makes sense.
Maybe I'll put some focus on HR specific, because I really understand that the metrics that will determine productivity and profitability are definitely something that needs some integration with the business between HR and business itself. So focusing on HR specifically, GoEasy has an approach and a process to determine these metrics, which is derived from the company's strategic initiatives or the company's metrics for the year, which are essentially categorized into three different ways. One being the run the business, is like what are the initiatives that are necessary to just keep lights on, pretty much. The number two would be the continuous improvement. So do better with the things that we already have. And then number one are the so-called the strategic initiatives, which are things that are new implementations that are going to eventually generate more revenue for the business. So this is how the company approaches its strategic initiatives, its strategic goals, and its main sort of company KPIs for the year. Now, when we derive that to HR specifically, we use the same approach, same exercise. So we have a wholesome HR sort of conversation about what are the goals for the years, and with that you come down to the teams, right? So GoEasy again, we have a talent and rewards team which has payroll, total rewards, HRBP, as well as recruitment. We have another department with leadership and culture. And communications, company's communications is also under HR. So within each of these groups, we determine what are the metrics that we evaluate and the question that we want to answer is, what is success for each of the sub-functions within HR, right? So just to give an example, in compensation, you may think about what is the SLA or the time to respond to a compensation request. That's a change to request, right? So this is a KPI that we try to measure. Our SLA is 48 hours. So if we don't respond in 48 hours, it's a -1 right there. When it comes to the HR systems, it's still under my shop, it's just being selfish here, it's data quality. So what type of data is in our HR system, and the way that we do that, it was just recently actually that we determined the KPIs for this year, is you put some correlations together between your data, so you pull all job title, and then you pull all job groups, and there has to be consistency there. If there's no consistency, then again, it's a no on that KPI, on that metric. And then you keep doing this for the same things for talent acquisition. It's time to fill, it's days open of a vacancy, or it's turnover within the first 60 days of employment, and those type of things. But I think the best practice, at least that we understand as a best practice, is the process you develop to determine what is success in each function.
I just wanted to pick up on
Please.
something. I think knowing your audience, as we were talking at lunch, is really, really important. Like, there's metrics for the HR function to run optimally that you need to set up and monitor, and then there's metrics that business leaders care about that relate to their workforce and people. Sometimes they overlap. My experience has been they often don't. Leaders in the business can care about different things. And I would also just say that you have to bring a story to a business leader that incorporates all of these COE inputs in a really simple and compelling way. I think HR, from my experience, has been a little bit guilty of kind of bringing a silo of a COE data to a leader. Well, that's not how they're going to operate. They want to look at their workforce and their talent kind of holistically.
Yeah, no, I appreciate both those answers. One of the things that I've seen, and I'm going to phrase this to a question, and Jeff's presentation earlier was talking about the business value of employee engagement, right? And so I'm interested with some of the ways that you measure employee engagement, because assuming all that data was true, it is super powerful and compelling, right? The numbers associated with an engaged employee versus a not engaged employee. So I'm interested in how you all are able to track and trace employee engagement, right, within your organization.
Yeah.
I may take the risk here of, think and talk at the same time. The engagement survey is ran by the leadership and culture function in the company, but it's a data point that flows into the system as well. It's an annual exercise. We do semi-annual, and then but what really determines the company's overall engagement score is on an annual basis. We have a target of 85% net promote score, and we've been fortunate to be above that target for the last few years.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's kind of run out of a different group as well, but we're very similar. We run an annual. We call it Winning Culture is our kind of cultural anchor at BMO. We run that annually, and we have an employee net promoter score as well. That's really a heavy index we use.
One of the things that I've asked of HR professionals that I've worked with when I'm in the CEO chair, or I serve on the board of a healthcare system with about 15,000 employees, is the time to productivity. And when you're having turnover, and now all of a sudden we understand, and we've all talked about and heard the cost of turnover, right? But what are we doing when we're bringing that new person in to then create that acceleration to where we're moving from the resume, the interview process, everyone's excited, but they now get to be productive? Because one of the things, I'll turn this to the question, anytime you have a new hire, one of the costs that is not really captured, right, is the cost of other team members to support that new hire, right? And so until that new hire is up to speed, they're not super productive, and in fact, they become somewhat of a drain, so to speak, on the organization. So I'm interested in in your general thoughts, right, as you look at retention and turnover, but what are some of the things we should be doing and thinking about, right, as we're bringing on new employees, right, to measure 30, 60, 90 days so that we do create kind of that roadmap for retention?
For me, it's quite simple. It comes back to kind of core definitions around what is productivity. And you got to get pretty deep into it. It looks different by job function, by job family, but to define that really well, I think is a great place to start. Yeah.
I think again, just talking theoretically, not necessarily practically, but it's not hard if you have the data to determine how long it takes for a new hire to get to a point of maybe it's sales of someone that has been performing for a while. I have a feeling, I want to say again, just from the top of my head, that it takes 6 months at GoEasy specifically. So that's, I guess, again, it brings the importance of the learning function and how fast you get that employee into that place. But also, again, being in a business where turnover is big, or it also increases the challenge at which you get the time to productivity, because you keep turning people over. But it's definitely a metric that is interesting. Not sure if all companies track that. Again, to me, it's still in the theoretical space, not necessarily practical.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's highly tracked in the leaders that I work with, but there's a disconnect that is really relevant. Because if we commonly think of 4 to 6 months for an employee to get up to speed, and the manager has a disconnect with that expectation, there's different types of pressures that occur. And that's one thing that I would throw out as something for folks in this space to kind of think about, because that mismatch creates a different pressure dynamic with people that are trying to get started in the organization.
I was just going to offer one
please.
nut that I haven't cracked, and it's easier, I think, with like a role like sales, where you can track, you can quantify outputs and value, but like if you think about knowledge workers, people in HR, finance, well, what makes them productive within the first 6 months? Sometimes you often have to go to their leader or crowdsource from a team around them, around how their productivity is ramping up. So it's a little bit elusive, I think, for some kind of more, I wouldn't say nebulous jobs, but some job roles like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things we talked on our prep call was some of our lessons learned in this space. So I want to give you all some room to navigate that topic, but really, what are some of the things or assumptions that we made that were untrue, but lessons learned in the space that could give guidance and to the folks in the audience?
I could start. It is a lesson learned. I'm still learning it myself. When you think about metrics, there's no shortage of metrics. There's thousands out there. I talked about the importance of identifying those KPIs, which have to be few. You really have to spend time kind of whittling them down. But when it comes time to rendering, visualizing, distributing metrics or KPIs, spend, I would say, 2 or 3 times the amount of time drafting a blueprint. So think about when you buy a house, or if you were building a house, you would want an architectural diagram. You'd want to see the construction drawings. That's where you change which room is going where and some of the design features. Whether it's just my own experience, I find you often get right into like the build of like a Power BI dashboard and not enough time on the blueprint. And if you slow down on the blueprint, that's when you can stakeholder, that's when you take it to business leaders and to your HR partners to get feedback. It's much easier to move things around in the blueprint phase than when you've gone live, because then people have already pulled together a data model. It's a real pain to go back. So I would say, like I said, 2 to 3 times the amount of time on your blueprint. Socialize it, stakeholder. It's building kind of that change management muscle as you go. And the second lesson tied to that is, I think Javier mentioned like they had the 80 plus dashboards at ATB. I'm not sure if that was like specific to HR, but my experience has been the same. We live in a digital age. Think of all the dashboards that exist. Anytime I'm building something to share with a leadership group, it's how can we simplify it? If we're going to put something new out there, what 3 or 4 dashboards or reports are no longer, useful, right? And need to be retired. When a leader, think about a line leader logging in to their workstation in the morning. Think of all the applications they need to access now. And I think Jonathan's talk yesterday about that low adoption number, part of my theory is that leaders are overwhelmed with applications that they need to log into. HR is just one of many functions where we're asking them to go in, do some work, check out some dashboards, make sense of it all.
I'm going to give you the mic in just a minute. I want to extend on one of the points you made that I just love, all of it good stuff, but it's building that blueprint, right? And you mentioned the word socialize, and I wrote in my notes, because I'm just insanely curious, blueprint and buy-in, right? And then build.
Yep.
Because one of the tensions, right, is if you go and build something, you're proud of it. You and your team have put effort in. So now any change or critique is not only change or critique, it's actually an emotional subtraction from the motivation of your team. Because I built it wrong. Why didn't I think of that? We're not on the same page.
Yep.
But if you do that blueprint and buy-in, that's now how you're driving collaboration. Now the business leader is saying, you know what, I love this. I don't really even understand this, right? But you're having a conversation before you've put that effort and time and emotional energy into the project. My experience leading and building with technologists in a former life when I was in the tech space is really understanding that mindset of people that are creative and analytical in their work and protecting that joy of what they're doing. And that build, blueprint, buy-in, and then build, I think was just a great way to articulate it. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, my lessons learned, I think I heard someone yesterday talking about Kronos and how much they like extracting data from Kronos. Well,
I missed that part.
from a lessons learned perspective, we transitioned our time and attendance system to Kronos. And we had the blueprint. The blueprint is something that you discuss on the pitch. It's like, what do you want from your infrastructure? What do you expect to get out of the system? What you don't realize is the effort needed to integrate that data with your in-house data. And to me, that bridge is always a gap, and it's the hardest piece to get done. Well, fast forward, now we have Kronos for about 6 months, and we just now, after 6 months, we're able to create a dashboard out of that tells the business what is their overtime percentage hours compared to the total hours spent in productive hours. Again, just this time of 6 months is frustrating for the business too, because they're waiting for it. So it was a big investment in this platform, this new platform. They were waiting for data to make better decisions. And again, because of the not so well thought through processes so the platform is great and it generates dashboards by itself. However, that data alone, it's not helpful if you don't integrate with your overall suite of data and pipelines and dashboards. And again, this was a blind spot for me when I joined this project, and led us to even creating a different path and a different route. We were still working with the full integration and bringing that data into the internal data lake, but the alternative and the faster solution was to do file feeds into our SharePoint that generated Power BIs for the operators. A big lesson learned there.
I appreciate that very much. I want to leave some room for questions, and so I'm going to wind that down now. And if we have the microphones that are on the ready, any questions from the audience as we wind down this presentation?
So this is the question for Doug, right? So when we calculate productivity, we know the denominator, the headcount. How do you get to the numerator when you have different business, right? If you have sales functions, it's easier to know productivity by how sales has increased time over the last period and so on. But if you don't have a revenue generating function, like you think of back office, middle office, right? You think of compliance department, audit departments, finance for that matter, right? What's and again, I understand everybody needs a different methodology, but what's this suggestion or recommendation to go around getting that numerator such that we can come to that elusive number of productivity?
So the question's around productivity for...
How do you calculate, right?
How do you calculate it? Tricky one. Maybe just in the interest of time, I'll come back to TCOW and something, total cost of workforce, and something that worked. So we would show total cost of enterprise workforce, which you got to work with finance. Like I always say, one of the biggest lessons in my career has been just how you have to integrate with finance. I mean, if you're not meeting with your finance partner once a week, I think that's a gap. But we worked together on enterprise TCOW. So you would show that, as I'm picturing like a line chart. And then if you want to measure the HR function, again, we'd show headcount on the side, but the percentage of HR TCOW to enterprise TCOW, because it might be okay for the cost of workforce in the organization to go up if they're in growth mode. What we wanted to measure is the HR function, you could do it with finance, procurement, is it growing at the same plateau? Ideally, it should be optimizing a little bit. So we'd use this comparison of call it functional TCOW as a ratio to enterprise TCOW. Hopefully that touched on it a little bit.
You have time for one more question?
specifically mention some KPIs or metrics to measure people analytics team's performance, like as a specific business within HR?
Team performance?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a little bit in the beginning. It's part of our annual exercise. We determine what success looks like for each team, for each function. And this is going to vary from function to function. But some examples are time to response on if you're compensation, time to respond to a recommendation. If you are benefits, is benefits participation. If you are, or you can even include communication, the frequency of your communications. You can include things such as some payroll metrics as well to determine the number of overtime hours, time off, those kind of things. Engagement surveys as well, engagement scores. What else can I bring from an example? Do you have any that you want to share?
I was going to say, like, if you're working on specific initiatives, if you can bring in financials and show the financial impact of some of the projects that you've worked on to the business and the bottom line, I mean, that's to me the ultimate.
Yep.
Yeah. Looking to see if there's any one question we made. Gentlemen,
Another one over there.
I think we can get one more in. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So my question is, which types of metrics would you suggest for measuring inclusion rate?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Inclusion rate.
I can kick off on that one. The metric that we measure, is we have a demographic, a piece of the demographic that is considered, how do we call it? We used to call it minority. We don't call it minority anymore, but it's somewhat like that. But it should be part of one of the categories that they, self-describe. And it's not that we have a target for that. It's just from a tracking perspective. It's part of our sort of HR metrics that we look at. And again, very reactive and mostly for the public to know how our demographics are distributed. And obviously actions to be made if anything drastically changes or not, or if there are some not very well represented groups in the company.
I've seen some good benchmarking. I don't know if it's census data, but there's external data, because ideally you want your workforce to mirror the communities in which you operate, right? So you can get some kind of, I would say, targets or some benchmarks that you can apply that are a good. Sometimes they're aspirational, right? But it's good to have down there on paper, so you're working towards something.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you all for your time. Give these folks a hand. Thanks, Doug. Thanks for your help.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
you.